Symposium with Aulak.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Symposium. Today's episode is You Can't Podcast with Kids. So as a result, it's pretty obvious we're probably talking about football today. So I'm delighted to be joined by three of my friends, Calvin, Lawrence and Arjun. So if you could please take turns just introducing yourselves briefly. So Arjun first.
Hi, I'm Arjun. I'm a die-hard Chelsea fan for my sins. And yeah, looking forward to talking about everything football in this podcast.
Lawrence?
Yep, I'm Lawrence. I'm a United fan. I am very sad this week because Ashford has been dancing ever since Liverpool won the title. But, I'll do my best to not cry too much during the podcast.
Calvin?
Hi, I'm Calvin. I'm a Tottenham fan. It's a shame there's not an Arsenal fan.
Oh dear.
Oh, God.
Right, so I thought that the best place to start would kind of be our first memories of football, or how you first fell in love with the game. What are some of your earliest memories? So yeah, Arjun, if you'd like to start on that.
So my earliest memory of going to a football game was I went to a football game with my dad when I was about 3, I think. I went to Chelsea Blackburn. It was a Premier League game. Yeah. I think we lost at home. But my first proper memory of watching football was the 2006 World Cup. Just watching it in the living room with my dad. Didn't really have a clue what was going on, but slowly getting to learn about everything through then.
Yeah.
And then from that season onwards, the 2006-2007 season was when I properly got into football, started following Chelsea and became more invested. And I think it wasn't until about probably 3-4 years later that I started properly trying to watch every single game of my club, and learning about past football history and tactics and all that sort of stuff, and becoming the sort of enthusiast that I am today.
So you were quite lucky, because in those kind of early periods where you were getting into it, Chelsea were genuinely really good, had the first Mourinho period, and then afterwards had that really good spine of players, Cech, Terry, Lampard, they were going through a really good period. So I suppose that might have contributed perhaps to your interest.
It was a golden age of the club. It was it was the best period of success we've had. Yeah. So I think I was quite lucky to be getting into football at that sort of age, rather than getting into it now when, whilst we're a top club, we are sort of challenging for the top 4 rather than challenging for titles and European success.
Yeah.
I think I was quite fortunate in that regard. If I was, say, a 5-year-old Liverpool fan right now, I'd be over the moon.
Yeah.
You're on top of the world right now. So
yeah. Lawrence?
I guess my first memories of football aren't going to matches. Because my dad wasn't really into... I mean, he supported United because we lived in Manchester, but didn't really go to many matches. What we did instead, what I did, is my dad bought me these season reviews. So I watched the 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 season reviews. Back then when season reviews were only made when you actually won trophies. 2015, 2016 Tottenham. But I just watched those videos and I fell in love with Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez. But I could tell you about.
Similar to Arjun, especially that 2007-8 United team was a quality team. That was just a beautiful team, and 3 Prems in a row again. So when you were just getting into it, you were fully on the top of the world, and it must have been really good actually, especially considering that you probably had a couple of years now which hasn't been as good, which maybe puts into perspective how good you were 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I think as United fans, we're constantly harking back to the old days, and for me the old days are 2009, which isn't that long ago, but in terms of the success, it's sort of light years off.
So Calvin, how did you become a Spurs fan?
So in terms of how I fell in love with football, it was through just playing it. So I think I started playing just in the garden age 3, started playing for my club age 4, played a year up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of club, until probably, I can't remember which year it was, but Martin Jol was the manager at Tottenham. So that's probably 2005-ish.
2005, 6-ish, 05, 06, yeah.
So that was the first time I actually supported the club. Otherwise, realistically, my knowledge of football was quite limited to the FIFA 2002 World Cup game.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, so my knowledge limited to that. So pretty much only knew David Beckham in terms of English players.
Yeah. So then, but the question would arise though. Then why Spurs? As in, because if you look at Arjun or Lawrence, they obviously supported teams which were doing really well, and even though they both had actual local allegiance, those kind of teams would have attracted them wherever they were in the world. So Spurs seems like quite a hipster team, especially at that stage, to support. So how did you get into supporting them?
Sure. So a bit of background. So my dad has no link to Spurs. He's actually a Liverpool fan.
Right. Okay. Sound chap.
But in terms of me, I've sort of so my local club, I don't really want to give away too much, but they were in the Football League at one point.
Right, okay.
But
why don't you want to give it away?
Because where I live.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Right, okay.
He's already worried about stalkers.
You're not famous enough yet. But go on, just carry on. Go on.
Yeah, okay. I watched a few of their games, but they weren't Premier League standard. A lot of my friends at that time supported Tottenham or Reading.
Yeah.
So that sort of gives away where I am in terms of the country. If the accent didn't give it away already, I'm in the south.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but so because of that, just because of my friends, I started watching Tottenham, and because of that, that's sort of my link to Tottenham.
Fair enough. So for me, it's like pretty similar in that my first memory of Liverpool, probably Istanbul, and then I remember 2005-06 I watched properly, especially the FA Cup final against West Ham. I remember that vividly, but I didn't really have a choice about who to support because all my family are diehard Liverpool fans. I've got my dad's Liverpool piggy bank and other merch from the 1970s. So I was never really given a choice, and I just kind of fell into it. And it actually, maybe it's more similar to Calvin than to Arjun or Lawrence. I didn't really have a club that was winning leagues or winning many European trophies for a long time. And other than the last 3 years, Liverpool, for most of the time I've supported them, did wallow in mediocrity for a lot of the time, which is a bit of a shame. But there are odd bits of joy, and certainly the last 3 or 4 years have made up for any kind of crap time that I had in the past with Hodgson, Dalglish, and the later Rodgers years. So no, I do consider myself fortunate, and I perhaps feel like I deserve this good period now, considering how crap it was in the past. But yeah, Arjun, you were about to say something. Yeah,
so Calvin's sort of anecdote about not wanting to be doxxed sort of raised an interesting point. Do you guys have any sort of second teams that you follow? So I think Ashwin, you followed Birmingham.
Yeah, I followed. So I live in Birmingham, South Birmingham. So I kind of just follow them. And my best mate is a hardcore Birmingham fan. So I've been to games with him. And yeah, I know that they're a solid club to support. Solid history, pretty old club. One of the early members of the Football League. So yeah, they're a decent club to support. What about you?
Yeah, so my second team I follow is Brentford. Now, for most of that time, they were sort of League One, decent side there. But now they're sort of looking to push up into the Premier League. They're doing quite well, third in the league, I think, in the Championship. So
they're decent.
It raised a sort of interesting moral question for me. If they get promoted next season, if they get promoted this season to the Premier League, do I continue following them to the same extent that I already do, or do I sort of let them take a back seat because obviously they're not my primary team?
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Lawrence or Calvin would think, but it's interesting, this idea of having one club, which I found is quite an English thing, in that when I went to uni and I met a load of international people who weren't from Europe, they had, one Premier League team, one La Liga team, one Bundesliga team, and that seemed quite normal for them. So whereas that seems very, very odd to us. So I wondered what Lawrence or Calvin thought of that.
Well, I'd say that I'd sort of retain the fact that I'd support one team.
Yeah.
But now that I've sort of grown up and I can watch games on my own, I'm finding that sometimes I just follow teams because I like their style of play. So right now, Dortmund and Inter, I try and catch most of their matches, and I'd say I support them in terms of I want them to win. I like the way that they play. I'd say also as a guy who played a lot of Football Manager growing up, I've fallen in love with teams that are just completely random, because you go on these journeyman careers.
So
that's how my second club's come about.
Yes, so I'm still following Resistencia in Paraguay because
that's quite hipster.
The Copa Libertadores, and
Calvin, what about you? Because you said you had a second team from
Yeah,
Football
so it was
Manager.
actually Bournemouth.
Oh, really? Was that
So-
before that? That must
Yeah,
have
so
been
that
when
was
they were, like,
League One.
League One Bournemouth.
Yeah.
I mean, their stadium hasn't changed. I'll say that.
Yeah, so that was also from Football Manager or FIFA career
Yeah.
mode.
Mm.
Just work your way through. They still actually have some of the players still, so it's not like completely different to when I was watching them.
hmm
And then you've got Eddie Howe as well. He's a great manager, good
Yeah,
English
he's a good manager.
talent as well. So those two just, yeah.
So no, that's interesting because then you would have supported them when they were in League One with obviously no kind of idea that they would get into the Premier League. I mean, even they, judging by their stadium and their facilities, they came upon them very, very quickly as well. So that must have been quite cool to watch.
Yeah, and sort of even though they're in the Premier League, yeah, sure, I'll watch them. But
Yeah,
it goes back to if they're playing against, like if it's Tottenham versus Bournemouth, then
obviously, yeah,
I
no
go for
competition. Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting talking about club football. So then, how do you guys watch a lot of international football? I mean, I assume most people watch the old England game when it's on. Do you have any good memories of internationals? Because for me personally, kind of the opposite with rugby union. For me, club football was always better to watch, always more fun. I'm always more into watching a Liverpool game than I am an England game. And I wondered whether any of you guys were different or.
Yeah, I much prefer watching my club play.
Yeah.
I guess recently I've found myself looking forward to England playing more because of their success, because of their sort of young talents, and I find myself more interested. But generally, in terms of international football, I like watching it purely because I'm watching players I may not necessarily know too much about. For example, in the World Cup, I like watching smaller teams. I like watching, say, I don't know, Iran against Nigeria,
Australia.
2013, or
Yeah.
random matches that I may not necessarily know that much about.
Yeah.
In terms of memories about international football, associated with England, I don't really have much. I have the nostalgia from 2 years ago of the World Cup, but
Yeah.
I don't know. We sort of wallowed in mediocrity for so long that most of the memories are quite unpleasant.
I mean, most of my memories are really random about England because
Yeah.
I have the one like game. It was a qualifier where Jermaine Defoe scored 4 goals. I remember that for some reason. And then my other really good memory. Okay, I have 3. So then the other one would be Gerrard's goal against the USA in 2010. And then
infamous
yeah.
game, yeah.
Yeah, where Rob Green fumbled the ball.
Robert
and then,
Green. Geez.
Yeah, and then the third memory would be Raheem Sterling's goal that never was against
Italy, yeah.
Italy, yeah. Those are my 3 main memories. So they're all a bit crap, actually.
I think
Lawrence,
I've got.
how about you?
That probably embodies the whole
Yeah,
England last decade.
Yeah, I
a bit
guess so.
crap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my first England match was the Euro 2008 qualifier against Croatia.
Oh wow.
So that was like the worst possible start,
I still don't get how that amazing team just didn't qualify. Just the names
Well,
alone.
I know why. It was Steve McCarron.
It's the Wally with a brolly.
Yeah, go on.
The thing is, I watched a lot of. England was a lot of the football content that I ended up watching growing up because we as a household didn't have Sky Sports. We had ITV, so we'd end up watching Champions League.
Yeah.
So one of my earliest memories is the 2008 Champions League final, which was a sweet memory.
Sweet memory for you.
But less sweet was all the England heartache and hurt that has occurred over the years. Euro 2016 against Iceland must be like one of the worst.
Oh Jesus! I had an exam the next day and I can't believe
that was
time watching it.
4 years ago today.
Oh, okay.
Was it? Oh
Yeah.
God. No,
I mean, I remember the game against Wales in 2016 because we were at school and we like stopped literally our lesson stopped so we could watch the last few minutes, and Daniel Sturridge put in the most scrappy, ugly goal you've ever seen, and I just and Joe Hart kind of palmed in it. It was just shocking. I should have expected that we'd go out to Iceland considering how poor those early performances were in the tournament.
I mean, when Jack Wilshere is like your biggest hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bit.
It's just not going to end up well, is it?
It's just not what we like to see.
But so we're already slagging off players. But
do you guys have any strong hopes then? I mean, I was going to talk about this later, but we may as well now actually. Do you guys have any hopes for the rescheduled Euros, considering that England, at least on paper, have some solid names?
If we don't get to the semi-final, it's a disappointing tournament.
I think we'll go out in the second round, and I'll tell you why. If we win the group, we're scheduled to play the third place team of Group F, and Group F has France, Portugal, and Germany in it.
Right. Okay.
And I can't see us getting past either of those teams.
So are you saying we should come second in the group?
Yeah, it's like the World Cup 2018, where if we came second, which we did, we would have had an easier path.
So then, if we come second, do you know who we play, or who we have a chance of playing?
I'll have to have a look, because obviously it's quite complicated because
the three teams.
Nations. If we come runner-up in Group D, we will face the runner-up of Group E, which is Sweden, Poland, Spain, and a playoff winner.
Right, so that's much easier.
Yeah. But I can see us winning the group, then unfortunately playing one of those three teams. I don't know. Right now, I can't see us getting past the second round. On paper, however, we should be able to get to the semis, if not for that sort of draw.
Lawrence,
Yeah.
I wondered whether you thought England had a better chance next year, or whether they would have benefited from playing this year in terms of maybe fitness of players or how people are doing. Because let's assume Harry Kane doesn't get injured again. Maybe he would be in better condition next year than he was just coming off an injury this year. I mean, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think England have kind of retained a lot of momentum since the 2018 World Cup, and maybe this break sort of stops that in a way, I guess.
Yeah.
I think still a lot. Well, national football as a whole isn't of the greatest quality right now.
No, I agree. It's
I
hard to
think
watch
that
sometimes.
England have a young and firing squad.
Yeah.
So I would say that, I mean, even if it is next year, England do have a pretty good chance on paper, at least.
Yeah.
It's the hope that kills you, though.
Yeah,
It's like when we
obviously.
have expectations, they're just going to be dashed at the first hurdle. So, let's hope.
Do you guys have any, Calvin, I guess I should throw it to you. Do you have any dark horses for next year's Euros?
Yeah, that's a tough one, actually, because we don't actually know who's through yet with all the playoffs and whatnot. And I do think someone who comes third in their group could get very far. I'm not just talking, you're that France-Germany group. I'm talking like someone that we don't expect could get quite far.
Yeah. I mean, Arjun, do you have any kind of specific teams that you think people are overlooking in terms of that could go quite far?
I think I've always liked Switzerland. I don't know why. I think they're always quite. When I see them, I'm quite impressed. They're quite dull to watch, but they're quite compact and very sort of organised at the back, and I think they could do well. Croatia are sort of underrated, even though they got to the final of the World Cup. They sort of overlooked and sort of.
They're a bit. They're quite aged. They're quite aging though, aren't they? And they. I mean, at least from my perspective, based on Mandzukic and Modric, they perhaps peaked in 2018. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, they have quite a good midfield. They've got Rakitic, Brozovic, Kovacic, Modric, and that's always quite strong midfield. Turkey, I've heard good things about Turkey. I can't say I've watched much of them, but I've heard good things about them, particularly their defence. I think in the qualifiers they beat France at home, drew against them away. But I mean, we see this a lot with teams in qualifying; they don't really turn up in the tournament.
Oh, England are a classic example, aren't they?
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, I think Poland is quite a good shout for a dark horse. I think obviously Robert Lewandowski is the big man up there.
Yeah, quality.
But there's quality throughout the squad. And if they can navigate their group, which is Spain in it, then I think they might have a good chance.
So the thing about Poland is that in the World Cup they had quite a nice group on paper. Colombia, Senegal, Japan, and I think they came bottom of that group.
I remember you saying, actually, Arjun, on that. I think that you said to me in 2018 when that happened that they hadn't played any warm-up games or anything before the tournament. So that might have been a factor. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but they sort of flattered to deceive in that. But hopefully they can come good, because it would be good to see Lewandowski do well in an international tournament. I don't think he's ever performed in one.
So I mean, perhaps maybe bringing it more closer to where we are now. How have you guys found the overall lockdown and the return of football? I mean, on a more kind of general basis, have you enjoyed watching games with no crowds? I mean, I personally watched them without the crowd noise. I think that's actually better. Yeah. I mean, what do you guys reckon? How have you enjoyed it? Because it's very different, obviously, to watching packed stadiums every Saturday.
Oh, I prefer watching without crowd noise. I think I prefer it to just like normal.
Really?
Even during normal times.
Really?
Normal atmosphere. I just really like sort of the raw nature of it,
Yeah.
People shouting at each other, like screaming, and there was a point in the City-Chelsea game when De Bruyne just he could have been 50,000 people. It was fantastic. I I don't know why. I really enjoy watching it like that.
Arjun?
Yeah, I've got used to it. I quite enjoy it. There's a part of me that wishes I had the crowd noise, but not the commentators,
Right.
or just not any noise at all, just the noise of the players. But
I know you're not the
think
biggest
that's
fan of. I know you're not the biggest fan of
Don't
Martin
like-
Tyler.
Yeah, Martin Tyler, bloody hell.
I can't really stand any of the pundits on BT or Sky, and I find their analysis and commentary quite drivel, to be honest. But I've got used to watching it without the crowd noise. As Lawrence said, it makes it really raw. You can hear the shouts of the players. And I was watching quite a lot of the Bundesliga before the Premier League started, and I found that interesting. I couldn't necessarily understand what the players were saying, but the fact that they were sort of saying anything made it more interesting. I could sort of try and interpret what they were going on about. Yeah.
Calvin?
So yeah, I prefer the watching it without crowd noise, as everyone else has said. You can hear what they're saying. You know, it really gives you a good insight, that side of things. The flip side of things is it sometimes does feel like a training match.
Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
You can see
sometimes
they're not pushing as hard.
Yeah, I guess also in that sense, as you just said, yeah, the lack of crowd does sometimes lead to a lack of intensity. And Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher specifically actually consistently moan on Sky about the lack of intensity in the games, in the Premier League games compared to normal. I mean, that actually might show something interesting about how maybe crowd motivate modern players more than we thought they did, or I'm not sure, but I mean that's something I find lacking.
We've seen from the Bundesliga and the Premier League, like, home advantage is basically being eroded without the crowd.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because one of the arguments against neutral venues to begin with was that, like, a home team should still be able to, like, choose their pitch conditions and all of that.
Yes.
But I think what we're seeing is that because of the lack of, like, ebb and flow that's created from the crowd, you're sort of getting a more technical game, and it's sort of like the best team always wins. There aren't that many upsets.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of just leads to less interesting games as a whole. I also think that the excessive breaks and all the drinks breaks and all of it's just kind of annoying.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
People have been moaning about that. I mean, Calvin, what do you think?
Yeah, so the home advantage, yeah, it basically doesn't exist. Like before, I'd say going to Bournemouth to play wasn't an easy journey. Now that's you're expecting to get 3 points as a big club now, realistically.
I mean, Jamie Carragher was talking about how Ronnie Moran, old Liverpool assistant coach, used to say that there were certain players who were brilliant in training, quite technical players, and then they didn't really turn up on a Saturday or Sunday because the intensity of the crowd and the atmosphere just overwhelmed them, and they wanted to spend too much time on the ball. And he said that the lack of crowd and the fact that the games have become more technical than intense maybe allows those kind of players to succeed to a higher extent that they would have had the crowd been present, which I think is interesting. Maybe we'll see more technical players do well this year than we would normally.
Yeah, I think that's to an extent true. Like I think it was the Everton game. They were a lot more structured, holding their shape. Whereas if the crowd was there, they probably would have urged them to sort of press and push, which means they lose their shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
No, I mean that's fair enough. I mean, so how do you guys think the Prem will pan out then after the break, and who do you think's benefited from the break? Because obviously, so we've seen the title race that was pretty much a done deal before the break, so that's now out the picture. So I guess I lend the question to Arjun. Who do you think has benefited most in the break, at least in, let's say specifically in the race for the top four?
I mean, from a bias point of view, we've benefited quite a lot. We had quite a lot of players who were out injured, and they've now come back.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of teams that have suffered. So the most pointed example is Arsenal. They've had quite a few injuries since the break resumed.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that the players weren't up to full fitness.
Yeah.
But and I think also Burnley. I remember so obviously you've had the new rule about naming up to 9 substitutes, which I think plays into the hands of stronger teams who have more strength and depth.
Yeah, deeper squads.
A team like Burnley, they I think this sort of goes with Dyche's sort of aggressive nature, but he only named 7 substitutes in their last game. I can't recall who was it against, but he only named 7 substitutes purely because of the fact that there's so many injuries, and he doesn't have enough players, to be honest. I think I can't quite say off the top of my head who it's benefited, but I think the stronger teams will definitely benefit from the increased substitutes bench. And
they beat Watford. They beat Watford 1-0, I think.
Oh yeah, that was
the last game. Well, Lawrence, what about you? Who do you think has benefited from the lockdown?
Well, I think the bigger teams have benefited, as Arjun has said. I think from a United's perspective, the fact that Rashford and Pogba have come back and have looked in tip-top shape has really benefited our race for the Champions League. In terms of who's actually lost out, I think Sheffield and Leicester have clearly faltered. I think they were sort of riding on their momentum, which is why they were so high up in the league. And now perhaps the quality of their squad is starting to tell, and they're falling off a bit. I think Leicester might actually have a problem holding on to that Champions League place.
Calvin, what do you think? Do you think that maybe teams like Arjun said, maybe Chelsea, and surprisingly enough, we haven't mentioned United. Do you think that they'll end up in the top four, considering that perhaps they were on a lower trajectory before the lockdown? Or
yeah, so a few days ago I sort of predicted the outcome of the last 8 games, and I've just sent the table outcome. That I predicted.
That you predicted.
Yeah, so I do think Tottenham have benefited from the break. You know, we had a lot of injuries before the break, and at one point I was like, this doesn't look good.
So for the benefit of the listeners, I'll give you his top 10 are Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea, United, Leicester, Spurs, Wolves, Sheffield United, Southampton and Everton. So you're putting Leicester in 5th. So based on perhaps the assumption that Man City will get their ban upheld, then Leicester will be in the Champions League.
Yeah. So in terms of that, I think as Tottenham, there's 21 possible points. I think we should be aiming for 17, if not 21, realistically. I think all of those are winnable games. The one I'm worried about is Leicester, to be honest, because teams decide to turn up against us for some reason, you know. Like Sheffield, even our next game, like they've been pretty poor, to be honest, since the lockdown.
Well, I mean, as Lawrence said, they might be a team that was kind of riding on momentum that's kind of been stilted by the lockdown, which is unfortunate for them because they were punching above their weight for a substantially long period of time. I mean, Lawrence, I've seen a lot of optimism among some United fans about perhaps not even this season, but more of the longer term future. Bruno Fernandes seems to be quite a good player. Your defence seems to still be solid. I mean, what do you think the prospects are for United? Perhaps this season and maybe next season as well.
I think a lot of the criticism recently against Solskjaer has been kind of unwarranted.
Yeah.
For the first time in 5 years, I kind of see some sort of direction from at least the manager, if not the club as a whole.
Right.
So I think people that say that Solskjaer isn't sort of the complete manager like Klopp, they're sort of missing the bigger picture and what he's actually achieved at the club. I think so. Some people say that he's not necessarily a tactical manager, like in the mold of Guardiola or Mourinho. So he will falter against the big teams. Well, I don't think that's been borne out, right? United have one of the best records against the top 6. They have 10 wins, 5 draws and 5 losses since Solskjaer's taken over.
Yeah, I think you're there. I mean, even as a Liverpool fan, I'd say that their goal scoring record is underrated. Certainly because people, when you say Rashford, Martial, you don't get, world class kind of perception, of course. But then you look at the numbers, and United haven't got bad forwards.
And especially goals conceded as well. We're one of the better defenses in the league, despite what people say about Maguire, De Gea, and so forth. Speaking of Rashford and Martial, Solskjaer's clearly made them better players. They both have 19 goals this season. They're having their best seasons in a United shirt. So I think that from that standpoint, Solskjaer's done very well in improving the squad that he has. And in terms of transfers, this is the key one for me from a United perspective. I think in previous years, our transfers didn't show any direction.
Yeah.
So if you think about signings like Daley Blind or Marouane Fellaini, or I'm just picking certain players, but there's a whole catalogue of nothing players that United have signed. But this year, it's clear that Solskjaer has looked at the squad and he thought, what do I need to get? I need to get a centre-back, Maguire. I need to get a right-back in Wan-Bissaka, who's having a fantastic season, and rightly so. And I need cover at right wing. And he's got Dan James, who's having his first season in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. Can't expect too much, but I'd say he's shown signs of promise.
I think Wan-Bissaka especially, and Wan-Bissaka and James are examples of, actually really solid signings that illustrate maybe a plan that maybe wasn't really there under Van Gaal or even Mourinho, where you were kind of getting people like Di Maria, Falcao that didn't really seem to lead to any kind of coherent strategy.
Exactly, and I think the problem we were having in the first half of the season is that we were doing decently against the top six, but we couldn't break teams that just sat back and wouldn't allow us to counterattack. So in the January transfer window, we bought Bruno Fernandes, who's done absolutely fantastically, and I see that he's in most people's post-lockdown 11s.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's done well. I mean, Arjun, if I direct it to you, I mean, how do you perceive United, their future, and maybe link it perhaps to Chelsea, because Chelsea have the Hazard war chest, they have Ziyech and Werner coming in. So what are your thoughts?
I think most people's conceptions about United previously before Solskjaer were strong defence, marshalled by De Gea, and they've been quite effective. I think 31 goals this season conceded, a goal a game, not too bad. But I think as Lawrence was alluding to, most people underestimate their attack. They've got the 6th best attack in Europe this season in terms of forwards scoring goals. Rashford, Martial combined for 50 goals, which people will be surprised by. Only Bayern Munich, PSG, City, and Leipzig and Barcelona have scored more.
Yeah, it's surprising.
I think United have a lot to look forward to. Given the City potential Champions League ban, United should qualify for the Champions League this season, whether it's by coming in the top 4 or coming 5th. I think there's a lot of promise for United, and obviously they've advanced in the semi-finals of the FA Cup. They can look to potentially make the final. So I think for all the sort of jokes that people make about caretaker Ole and not being particularly effective as a manager, I think that he has done more positive for United than negative, and I think United fans should look forward to future success. In terms of Chelsea, I think we have enough to get past United in terms of finishing above in the table. I think what most people underestimate is how difficult the season for Chelsea this could have been on paper. We lost our only real game-changing player in Hazard. We had the transfer ban, and it could have easily gone downhill, especially given our first couple of results, losing 4-0 to United away, drawing at home to Leicester, collapsing at home to Sheffield United. Yeah. But we're on course for a top 4 finish. We could even potentially finish 3rd. We're still in the FA Cup, of course. And despite the fact that we're 99% out of the Champions League, the fact that we made it out of the group anyway was pretty impressive. I mean, you could say yes, it was a fairly weak group, but on paper, and on paper, we sort of made the most out of it. We could have
I agree.
done better. But I think, and coupled with the fact that we've been giving lots of playing time to academy players or just young players in general, I think it's been quite an enjoyable season to be a Chelsea fan, despite the uncertainty that still is there about finishing top 4. I think, similar to United, we have a lot to look forward to. But I think compare it with, say, Spurs, and I think Calvin coming on this, who they've regressed massively since last season. I just want to, taking the role of host for 1 second, I just want to ask Calvin, what does he think of Spurs' future under Mourinho?
Yeah, I mean, Calvin, just before you jump in, I'd just like to ask you to first draw attention to the pic you sent in the chat of the Premier League since Mourinho came to Spurs, and second, along with engaging with what Arjun has said, could you talk a bit about the stadium and its perhaps financial impact? Because we saw with Arsenal what happened when they had their Emirates, and it didn't bode well for them. So what are your overall thoughts?
Yeah, so in terms of since Mourinho took over, I mean, we were really on relegation form since February last year. Really, if we're going to be honest, the Champions League run just papered over the cracks. We've been in relegation form for a while. I think Poch lost the dressing room by the end, realistically, in terms of control. Yes, the players loved sort of playing with him, but I've heard through rumours and whatnot that the players are getting bored of his training techniques. They're running him to the ground, we had so many injuries at one point. It was stupid. I think it was we had one centre midfield player, and we play a double pivot role. You're a bit screwed at that point.
Yeah.
In terms of Mourinho and the future, I think it could be really good. He has the winner's mentality we've been missing. If we're going to be honest, we've got to how many finals or semi-finals as well, and amount of times we've just collapsed.
Yeah.
I do think the Champions League wasn't really a collapse. It was an unfortunate decision. in the
Yes.
first minute, and that basically ended the game there and then.
But how do you think the stadium will affect your future? Do you think, especially with Corona, that your finances will be poorly impacted? Because Spurs aren't really a club that splashes out anyway. Do you think that will be even further inhibited by the stadium and Corona?
So I don't think would get obviously everyone's taken an impact due to Corona, but I don't think it would be too bad. Like the stadium has a lot of commercial opportunity. So we've got the NFL. We were supposed to have concerts during the summer as well. Obviously that's going to be delayed. But we have that opportunity. We've also got the fact that it's going to be used for other sports, such as rugby. The Saracens game was supposed to be there before Corona hit. So like there's a lot of commercial opportunity. There's also supposed rumors on like naming rights and whatnot. And yeah, I don't think paying it off will be that much of a problem compared to like Arsenal.
Okay.
In terms of transfers,
are you afraid of transfers? I mean, are you afraid of people like Kane perhaps leaving?
So I think with Kane, we've got really one more year. Sure, I'll be annoyed about him leaving, but you can't blame him if you don't win anything in this many years. End of the day, he is a top player. He will want to win things. But I do think he has a loyalty to Tottenham. You know, he's the one that, went through the academy, come through into the first team. Loves scoring against Arsenal, so I do think he'll have a sense of loyalty, but he will leave if we don't show any progression in the next year. But I do think we can show that progression in the next year. Mourinho's come in. Our defense was one of our weak points for years. Apart from 2016-17, our defense has always been.
That's surprising you say that, because obviously they had quite a few good names. You had Alderweireld. At one point you had Walker, Alderweireld, Vertonghen.
Yeah, so that's the 16-17.
Yeah. So other than that, you said that they've been quite weak, because that goes against a lot of people's perceptions of Spurs anyway.
So I think if we go back even to the past, like up until the Alderweireld era, as it were, our defense was shocking. Like, we'd be surprised if we don't concede goals in a game, really.
Yeah.
And now after, we seen Jan Vertonghen, I can't remember what game it was, but he got subbed off and started crying because he was having an awful game. But I think at that point, even he knew that he was sort of done in the Premier League. He's a bit old. The pace is a lot quicker than he's used to. And I think it's quite telling that Mourinho's chosen to go with Jadon Sanchez at least since the restart, as his starting centre-back pairing.
Lawrence, talking about transfers, do you have hope for Sancho coming to United? Obviously, there have been rumours about where he's been going. He's been, lots of rumours about random places been floating around. Do you have any specific hope that he'll go to United, or any perhaps decently plausible information that suggests so?
I think the rumours are floating towards that direction. I'd say it'd be fantastic if we got him, obviously, but regardless of whether we get a big name player like Sancho, I think the direction the club is going in is positive. But I'd just quickly like to go back to Tottenham. I think that the appointment of Mourinho shows that the problems are running much deeper than spending power.
I would agree.
I think that it was a very puzzling appointment for me at the time. I think it's very backwards. I think that having lived through 3 years of just misery and discontent at United, I struggle to believe why Daniel Levy would appoint a manager like Mourinho. And I think it's not just that you'll have the money to attract players with a new stadium. It's whether players will want to actually come to the club at all. Because Mourinho, whether you like it or not, has this reputation for not necessarily being the greatest of managers.
Yeah.
Do players want to join a club that probably won't make the Champions League this year?
I mean,
and
Arjun
don't have a club a manager that you'd want to play for.
I mean, Arjun, could you talk a bit about the third season meltdown stuff that you seem to be quite knowledgeable on in terms of Mourinho?
I mean, he always has this meltdown. So not at Porto, but going to Chelsea third season, 2007-08, we started terribly. He got sacked after a 1-0 defeat against Rosenborg in the Champions League. Inter Milan, he left because he basically had a breakdown in relationship with the owner, Moratti. Real Madrid, again, another breakdown with Florentino Perez. United, predictable breakdown with the manager, with the players. he always seems to have a breakdown in trust with either the board or the players or the fans, and this always leads to him going. And it seems, I mean, he's only been there, half a year, but it seems that this sort of negative relationship with Spurs is being brought forward quite early, and I just don't see him staying, say, another year. I can see him leaving, probably by his own volition. I just find it, the Mourinho of 2020 or 2019 is not the Mourinho of 10 years previously. It's not the Mourinho that came to Chelsea, proclaimed himself to be the special one after taking Porto to European success. I just think it's quite a backwards appointment by Spurs, to be honest.
Lawrence, could you talk a bit about maybe, so someone like Jonathan Wilson has written very well and very eloquently about perhaps football moving away from Jose Mourinho's kind of philosophy of the game, perhaps going away from the kind of negative, defensive, solid aspects of the game to a more lively, either Pep possession-based game or maybe a more of a Klopp pressing game. And do you think that those kind of maybe tactical trends, if they're true, contribute to this overall negative perception of Mourinho?
Well, personally, I think too much stock is made of the philosophy of managers in terms of, we must play a certain way. I think that sorry to keep bringing it back to United, but the way that United have operated over the past half a year is, we adapt our style for the team we play against. We play counter-attack against the top six. We play possession-based football against teams that don't want the ball, and we try and break them down. And sometimes that does work effectively. You don't have to play the same way against every opposition. Yeah. I think the issue with Mourinho is that, he seems to play the same certain way regardless of the players he has on the pitch and regardless of the situation that his team have found themselves in. I think there was a point where they were just chucking the ball up to Lucas Moura like he was Harry Kane in one of the matches. I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous. It just borders on stubbornness, and it kind of seems like he's got this point to prove that he'll just do whatever he wants to do regardless of the consequences on the pitch. And the way he's using his players just seems ridiculous. I mean, he was roundly criticised for keeping Harry Kane on the pitch over the past few matches, despite looking like he couldn't run anymore. And I think it's not just that he's not playing a certain style of way like Klopp or Guardiola. It's just that he's just not being a good manager.
I was going to just ask all of you more generally about your kind of predictions for who's going to go down from the Premier League this year, and again, perhaps any impact of lockdown on those teams. So start with Calvin.
Yeah, so my predictions, I went for Bournemouth bottom. I just don't see, they're not scoring and they're going to leak goals. They've lost that home advantage. They're pretty much going bottom for me. Norwich just above, again, same reason. Though they show some great attacking play. I don't see them staying up. They just have too much of a gap to make up. Even I do think they should have maybe won yesterday, but that's a different matter. And then I think West Ham in 18th.
Okay, that's not great for Karen Brady and all those people.
However, I will say Aston Villa, they were 17th for mine. I've given them a good point gap, but actually that could change given that I watched their game yesterday and only Jack Grealish was showing any promise. Everything else, there was no creativity. They didn't look like they were going to score a goal. So that could be the team that sort of starts underperforming in my eyes, even though they were expected maybe not to break out the relegation zone at the beginning of the season.
Okay, Arjun?
It's a 4-horse race with 2 spots. I think Norwich will finish rock bottom. I can't see them picking up enough points to catch up even Bournemouth.
Yeah, I was surprised that Calvin put Bournemouth below Norwich actually. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Villa, I think, will go down. They've got a bit of a nightmare last few fixtures. They've obviously played Wolves yesterday. They lost that. They've got United at home, Liverpool away, Arsenal at home as well. And they've also got a fixture final day of the season away to West Ham, and I think that could be a sort of winner takes all fixture. I think Villa will go down, Norwich will go down. I think the final spot will also be Bournemouth. I can't see them picking up enough points. I think West Ham will survive by the skin of their teeth. They've got 2 home fixtures against Villa. The final 2 home fixtures are Villa and Watford. And if they pick up 4 points from that, I can see them surviving. Watford, again, they're in a bit of trouble, but I can see them picking up just enough points to stay up. So yeah, my bottom three would be Villa, Bournemouth, and Norwich in that order.
Okay, and Lawrence?
Yeah, I think Norwich are the clear. They're going to go down. I don't know if you saw the match yesterday against United. I mean, it's a microcosm of their entire season. They've looked all right in patches, played okay football, but they just haven't got any results, and that kind of tells. And they're almost certainly going down. I think Bournemouth, they have quite a tough run in. They've got to play United, Tottenham, City, Leicester, Everton in their final games, and I think that will sort of push them over the edge. I think West Ham. I think West Ham are going to be the third team to go down. Personally, they just don't look any good whatsoever. Aston Villa, I could see picking up a few points. I think they have some quality in their side. Jack Grealish, especially, sort of, I think will drag them out of the relegation zone. But yeah, I think Norwich and Bournemouth are the surefire favourites for me.
Just to add to that, you were saying like Norwich, they look good, but they're not getting results. That sounds quite close to home with Tottenham. We used to play really good football, looked good, but we wouldn't win anything. So I think going back to what we were talking about with Mourinho earlier, fine if it's not the best brand of football, you're not going to be outplaying the opposition game week in, week out. But the one thing we've never been able to do is win ugly, and that's a sign of champions. Really.
I've noticed that with Liverpool, as in Liverpool, the 2017-18 iterations and the Rodgers iterations that came before, always beautiful going forward, score a load of goals, but when it came to a team that wanted to sit back and actually had decent kind of discipline, maybe kind of Tony Pulis, Sam Allardyce style team, which actually had decent organisation, Liverpool always struggled to break them down, and that's what kept them from maybe fourth or kept them from better than fourth. And it's kind of been a sign of Klopp's team that he's, in the last couple of years, that he's willing to play more conservatively, willing to, hold some stuff back in the attacking sense to actually have a more solid foundation that allows them to be perhaps more intricate and break down those teams that desire to sit back. And I think that kind of latter stage of development is what's been missing from Tottenham in terms of pushing them over the hump certainly in the league. So, I mean, all those are quite interesting predictions for going down. To change the subject slightly onto the final topic, I wondered whether you guys had watched interesting Serie A or Bundesliga matches recently post the lockdown, and had anything to note in terms of maybe playing styles or interesting teams or interesting matches you've seen. Arjun, if you want to start.
So yeah, as mentioned before, I watched quite a lot of the Bundesliga beforehand, just probably a game or two each round. I found it interesting. I mean, I don't tend to watch the Bundesliga that much anyway. I prefer watching Serie A personally, but in terms of interesting games I can recall, I watched Dortmund Schalke, which was 4-0 to Dortmund, Dortmund Bayern, 1-0 to Bayern. And then that was at the start of the lockdown, the start of the resumption, when I was sort of getting used to the lack of crowd intensity and all that. So I didn't really take much away from those games. But in recent times, Serie A's returned, which I'm quite happy about. Just a plug that all the games are available on the Live Score app, which is quite cool. You don't need any sort of subscription; you can just watch them live on there. And I've been watching some games there. Like last night, I watched a bit of Lazio against Fiorentina, which was pretty decent. The thing with Serie A is the playing style is obviously quite slow and can be quite lethargic if you compare to the sort of rush and tumble of the Premier League and even the Bundesliga. But I think I bring it back much earlier to what Calvin was saying about FIFA. I was always drawn to Serie A because of playing FIFA and Football Manager, and I don't know why. I found myself drawn to that league more so than the others. So I've always taken an interest in Serie A personally. Apart from those two other leagues, I haven't really been I haven't been watching any sort of other football. Yeah. Because obviously, we're in a unique situation where there's so much available to us right now, and so much is being available via streaming, more so than ever before. You've obviously got the Premier League airing all of their games on various websites and platforms, but I haven't paid attention to anything else.
Lawrence?
Well, I think like most people, because the Bundesliga was the first major league to open up, we all sort of jumped on that bandwagon. And what struck me, well, two things struck me. Dortmund are just so frustrating at times. I'm thinking especially of the Bayern game. Played such great football in that game, and it's just that one little goalkeeping. It's not even an error. It's just he moves off his line, and then Kimmich just absolutely beautiful goal. Beautiful.
Yeah,
chip.
I saw that.
But you leave that game thinking, how have Dortmund not won that? And then you think, okay, this is why Bayern have won the league like 10 times in a row.
Yeah.
They don't have any fortitude. They don't have any sort of mental fortitude and strength in the big game.
Exactly. And I think they're not going to have that for a while, it looks like, under Lucien Favre. The second thing that struck me was just how good Timo Werner is. I mean, it's just ridiculous. In my opinion, he's the most complete forward in Europe.
Well, that's high praise.
I think his build-up play is almost as good as his finishing, which is fantastic. I mean, his goals and assists speak for themselves. And as a Chelsea fan, Arjun must be licking his lips.
I mean, they've got Werner coming, they've got Ziyech, they might even have Havertz. I mean, I think personally, Chelsea on that are only perhaps a centre back away from a quality title challenge.
Oh, and a left back, to be honest.
Perhaps a left back, yeah. Alonso's a bit. Arjun, what do you reckon on Chelsea?
I'm quite optimistic, as I said, about the future, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I think I don't want to get excited about Havertz yet because I can't see him joining us personally. But I think, I think definitely a left back is what we need. I'm quite hesitant about buying Chilwell. He's overpriced. He's English. He's young. So of course there are going to be links with him. But I think we need to be looking at players such as there are rumours about Tagliafico from Ajax.
He's very good.
There are rumours about Alex Tellez and Grimaldo from Benfica. I think a centre back is also what we need. We've got a sort of wealth of centre backs available to us. Tomori, Zuma, Christensen, Rudiger. But Lampard has constantly changed the centre back pairing this season. There've been so many different combinations of the four players, and I think we need to decide. We need to sell one of those four, and potentially bring in a better centre back, someone like someone who's on the same tier as a Koulibaly or Skriniar.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Just because I think, what again benefited Liverpool was having a certainty of Van Dijk, which meant not only obviously competence on the pitch, but then you knew that your top pairing would be him and probably Gomez / Matip, but normally Gomez. And then that meant that everyone knew what their spot was and there was certainty and people could perhaps relax and express themselves. And if you're kind of chopping and changing, again, as Liverpool used to do when they're, before Van Dijk, when we used to concede tons of goals, then no one was really secure and you get nervousness and it doesn't really bode well. I mean, I'd like to direct to Calvin. I mean, Calvin, anything on Serie A, Bundesliga you've seen, or perhaps La Liga, anything at all that you've seen for European football after lockdown?
Yeah, so like Arjun and Lawrence, Bundesliga, just because it was the first one back.
Yeah.
I've watched a bit of the Championship though, actually. Because obviously you want to see what teams are coming up, not just for fantasy football reasons, but it's all quite tight at the top. I think Leeds should be winning that league every day of the week, but they should have won it last year maybe, or at least got promoted last year. Yeah, so only time will tell what happens to there. Yeah, that's what it is really. Watched a bit of the K League as well, just to
Son Heung-min.
Nice.
I did watch the first game, the first 20 minutes of the K League, because that was actually the very first league that got started in the Bundesliga. I turned off after 20 minutes because I wasn't really feeling it, but I can proudly say I watched 20 minutes of the K League game. I think it was like Jeonbuk Hyundai against someone else. I can't remember, but yeah.
Interesting. So, okay, I'd like to just finish on final, just one sentence. What is your one sentence bold prediction for next season? Just finish on that. So, Arjun?
Come back to me in about 1 minute.
All right, Lawrence?
Oh, you've really put me on the spot here.
Doesn't have to be right, just be bold.
Given that we haven't mentioned them at all this podcast, which I think is kind of a shame, I think Arsenal are going to finish bottom half of the table next season.
Really?
Oh.
Okay.
I thought your bold prediction would be that they'd finish top four.
I don't think that's bold. I think that's
Nah,
Can't have
I can't.
I don't think that's bold because I think Aubameyang's leaving realistically.
Oh, I know he wants to stay, doesn't he?
And I just don't see them. If he leaves, who are they signing? They don't exactly have the pulling power anymore to sign someone good.
Calvin, do you have a bold prediction?
Yeah, I actually think Tottenham are going to have some good signings coming in. Main
Okay.
reason is
That is bold.
Yeah,
Luke
that is quite bold.
Campos. It's been heavily linked with us, and he was the one that recommended Sacramento to join Mourinho as his assistant. So I think that.
No, that's actually interesting reasoning.
I think if we get
Arjun?
him in, the signings are in.
Arjun?
Bold prediction about next season. I'll go for a Euro prediction. I think Italy will win the Euros. That's my bold prediction.
Ooh, that's very bold. That actually is. Do you have any reasoning on that?
No, just gut
Okay.
feeling, right?
Just start feeling. Right, okay.
It's one sentence for a reason, right?
Yeah, okay, no, true. That's my fault for asking. Right. Well, I'd like to thank you all. Thanks to Arjun, Lawrence, and Calvin. That was really enjoyable, at least for me, and I hope it was for you as well listening. Thank you for listening to this.
One or two listeners we have, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Symposium, and please do join us next time. Cheers. Thanks.
The Symposium with Aulak.